everything is going.
Okay, good.
I haven't done anything
It's
wrong.
1
yet.
o'clock and, even though
I never
we
heard from
don't
you
have
guys,
everyone
so I
here
figured
that is
everything was
expected,
fine.
we may as well get started. The first item of business is approval of minutes of the April 27 meeting of this committee. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Mr. Raven has made a motion, Mr. Hauser seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, no. Motion carried. The next item of business is to review the status of the project to add space for cats, to include available funding, next steps, and to develop and approve plans, proposed timeline, and other important considerations relative to the animal shelter. I'm going to call initially on Mr. Wedwick to initiate that discussion. I think we found out at our last meeting that even though this committee is charged with oversight of the facility, not the operation, but the physical facility, that we're not up to speed on that, so this is an effort to get everybody on the same page.
Okay, we've had drawings, again, this is preliminary, very rough. We are moving forward on, and a lot of the final stuff.
I think we got it.
Yeah, these are, but we got them here.
Okay, I have my own.
You have your own.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So this is what the proposed thing is. It's going to be 20 by 40 addition to the building, to the current animal shelter. And again, this is just a preliminary or rough thing. If you look at it, this was done by one of the county members here to draw it up. Our next step, and we had one meeting to discuss further things on it. You can see that there are playrooms, there are cat cages, and then on the left there are monkey cages, which is just another term for cages for the cats. There's an open area in the middle. The playroom would be where people could come and play with the cats or see the cats. And
the rooms will actually be where cats will be living.
Mm-hmm.
The rooms we have now, the 2 rooms we have now, they're small. Those will be converted into playrooms.
go ahead, yeah.
So yeah, those cat rooms will be where multiple cats can live.
For that, and because now a lot of the cats are in the storage room. And these cages include, we went out and measured and everything. These include the ones that are stored in the Gates building right now, because we do have, these cages are quite expensive or quite nice, the ones in Gates building. So they'll be moved into here. Again, this is very, very preliminary. We don't have costs or anything like that. Some of the changes that, this was the first draft, some of the changes that we talked about at our last meeting. If you look up there, okay, the existing buildings to your right, this will extend out toward the west.
Parking lot, where the parking lot is.
Right. And if you look at the upper right-hand corner where you see a slash, we're thinking about, because one of the deficiencies of the animal building is it's not handicapped access. And I think when they went through and Wool did their study and everything, that was one of the deficiencies that had to be addressed. Well, it costs quite a bit of money to do all that, and the entrance coming in, you come in and you make sharp corners and everything. We're thinking about maybe putting the handicapped entrance right there by the cat playroom in the upper part, because then they can come directly into the building, they can come in this area, or you can see the thing that says existing building there on the right, and they could go directly in there, and they wouldn't have to have, we wouldn't have to redo all the other stuff, and the entrance to the building now and coming in is sharp corners and everything, so they could, save money by doing this. This would also give more room for people to come in and see the cats in the cages. And like Dawn said, the multiple, playrooms. We have 2 playrooms right now that we'd probably still keep.
Yep.
But this is, more for the cats. We're thinking about, again, some of the stuff, whether we need in-floor heat or not, to help with that. What type, it's gotta be a non-porous thing, in the wall. I mean, we're talking about some of the physical aspects of it. Probably wanna have at least 5 drains in this room. Another question that came up that we were discussing is, if you've seen the building, it's got a steel roof, and a peaked roof, so this would have to be steel and peaked to fit the regular building. Question has come up whether we need to put gutters on the whole building. Maybe we just need to put something so the ice doesn't come down and crush people when they walk in, but right now the rain and snow and ice just comes down on top of everything. Again, this is just a preliminary thing. And over on your left there, where you've got a window, at the top, that may probably become a door, because if we need to take these cages out and have them washed or anything, that we probably need a door there, and it might be required also. But again, this would be just adding on and a 20 by 40 thing. Do you have anything else to say or questions?
The circulation area in the center of the addition appears at first glance to be quite large. Looks like it might be on the order of 12 by 33. Can you go into a little bit more detail on what the functions of that would be? I know you mentioned for people to look at cats, but that seems like a lot of room.
Which part?
This part.
It's,
Open center section.
so again, this is just a rough draft. So the playrooms may actually have to come out another foot and be taken in a little bit. So, that space may end up being smaller. We didn't really, when we put these together, there's gonna be doors that go into these rooms. And when you have to open that door, that takes out more space. And there's cat trees in some of these. So this may actually come out, instead of being 6 feet long, it may actually be 7. And then depending on, the door for the, handicap door, that may have to be wider, so that may make those rooms a titch smaller in length, if that makes sense.
It looks like if you rotated those rooms, you could actually get 6 of them in, or 5.
Possibly, yeah, possibly. So it's just like, this is just a rough draft, so we're not, so they might be a little bit longer or shorter. When you have, the rooms we have now are actually, I wanna say the depth is 10 feet and the width is 6 feet. And there are probably 4 cats in there is pushing it. So there's not a ton of room in there right now, so I wanted them a little bit wider. So we'll just have to see what happens with the handicap entrance and how big those rooms will actually be.
Dawn?
Yeah.
How deep are the cat cages? Are the ones that are in the current room going in there? And they're not exactly tiny, so.
No, I wanna say 64 inches deep.
They were pretty.
They're
Pretty big.
They look like only about 2 feet on here, but.
They're big. I think they might be 3. So again, this is just but they're gonna come out, I think they might be 3 feet deep.
And these are stacked.
They're stacked, so
There's
they're
two sets on each one of these cat cages. They're 2 levels, 2 different cages.
so they look really small, but they're not as small as they look.
I know,
But I think they're like 64 inches deep, or
so.
that's what I measured them. I can't remember off the top of my head, but-
Are you able to touch on some of the other subject matter, like next steps,
Well,
cost estimates?
what we want to do is, maybe update this drawing a little bit, but then we were thinking about going to Tony Lumber and having them price out stuff. Again, we need to know, you know, the roofing, a non-porous surface, cause, what was done in the current one really isn't appropriate. We've gotta make sure, because some of the stuff in even the playrooms,
They get
mold-
wet, sometimes things get wet.
yeah, and the molding,
The cats.
and this is, like I mentioned before, like at least 5 drains, so that this stuff can be hosed down and can be cleaned, because, well, there's a lot of cats and, stuff like that. So we were thinking about getting, maybe taking it to Tony Lumber and having them price something out and giving us their ideas and everything as the next step, to come up with a rough price, because we do not have that now.
Mrs. Spooner?
Or you got his hand up.
No, that's fine, go ahead.
I talked to Larry Bertigan at Tony Lumber, and he said that, they could do, a building, the actual materials estimate. But he said that if your building is, more than 25,000 cubic feet of air under the roof, and that includes the attic space, that it would have to go to an architect. And he said he, could direct us to architects, and I'm sure because it's for the county or the city, that it would have to, it'd have to be state approved too. But he could do materials estimate for us to give us an idea probably to start. And he would need the original plan, which we have, and then add it on to that, and then, make the whole plan and how it would go on to the building and stuff.
That 25,000 cubic feet is total, that includes the original building.
Right,
So
right,
this
sorry,
would,
yeah,
this would
right.
definitely be over that, so.
Right,
So
right.
Tony could do a drawing, a little closer that could be shipped off to it.
Yeah. He did tell me that just from, I did look up the original building and thought it was more than the 25.
My first comment was gonna just be that what John had said, is that you add those two buildings together, you're gonna be over 25,000.
Right.
Second part of it is, you're not gonna be able to tie into the ventilation from the existing. So somewhere in here, you have to have a ventilation system, as well as Terry was talking about, you have to have a boiler of some sort that you're going with in here somewhere, so make sure you make room for that in your plans.
Right.
And you may even have to, I'm not sure what you got in there for restrooms and stuff, but if you got people coming in, you might even require that.
The restroom is right by where it would be added on, and there's plumbing right there too, right by where the addition would go on.
I got a question, Terry, I hadn't been out there in a while, but I know the cat room were pretty full when I was there, but if you double check these cat cages on the south side, how do you, how do you clean, is there space between them where they can't come up against the screen and try to get at each other, or, is there one little wall between each one where they're double decked? And then if you clean the top one, there's something in the bottom.
No.
How do you clean them?
They're basically separate cages that are stacked on each other.
Oh, and then you just bring them down and then clean them?
Yeah, we have them in the back. Well, if you go into the adoption room now, that only fits 8 cats. Only 8 cages in there. But yeah, it's like a cage on top of a cage, but there's no, the cats can't get to each other
Okay.
from the cages.
There's a floor in the bottom of the
Yeah.
cage, so I mean,
They're separate, but they're stacked.
Right.
Oh,
That
sure,
makes sense.
okay.
like stacked cubes.
Yeah.
And I can even hear cats in the yard, man, when they get fighting, that's.
Yeah, no, they can't get to each other.
Oh, okay.
Not unless when
Very
you
good.
open the door and you're feeding them, every once in a while, one will wanna play with the cat next door, but they can't get to each other.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify
You
that.
should come visit.
It would be a while, well, no, it'd be kinda noisy in there if it was like I'm thinking.
Right, yeah,
So,
no,
okay.
they're pretty chill.
I will stop over.
John?
So you mentioned moving some cages out of the existing building into here. What's the total increase in capacity?
It's not an increase in capacity, it is basically housing what we already have. So all of the cats that are not up for adoption or can be up for adoption are in the storeroom. So the storeroom is usually pretty full. Those cages, the big cages in the storeroom are gonna go in this part. The cages that are wherever they are gonna go in this part to house the cats we already have. There is no sick room for cats right now, so if we have cats for adoption, cats that need to be spayed and neutered, cats that are sick, multiple litters of kittens which don't fit in the impound room where animal control drops them off, all are in the storage room. So we have a mix. And so then when we bring people back there, because we have cats that are up for adoption back there as well, they're seeing all these cats that we have back there, whether they're sick, whether they're, whatever, then it's just kind of not a good, there's no windows in there, the ventilation in there is not good, they get really dusty.
It's a storeroom, it's not.
It's a storeroom, it's not meant for the animals, so this is not, I only have 2 part-time employees, and I have me. So I'm not looking to increase anything. I just wanna be able to have the cats that are there, have them in a nice environment where they have windows, where they're available for adoption. This little room back here, this is basically gonna be a wall here. This room here is for cats that are not ready for adoption, that either need to be spayed or neutered. So that they're back here so people can't see them. The storeroom is gonna have a wall that parts it off so that I can create a sick room back there. But it will get a window, and maintenance is gonna do that for me, but we're gonna do it at the same time. And then we will have a storeroom, because there's a garage door there, because I have people that wanna, bring loads and they wanna open that garage door. I have cats sitting back there. And if you have pregnant cats or cats that are nursing kittens, it's extremely stressful back there for, all that stuff. So that's basically what we're trying to do, is just create a nice environment, relaxing for the cats we already have. I don't wanna increase anything, I don't have enough staff to bring more animals in that shelter. So.
Do you want to explain to you what monkey cages are?
Oh, I call them monkey cages so I can differentiate them from the other
They're
ones.
a different cage.
They're smaller, but they have these weird metal, they have handles, and they're actually used for monkeys. So whoever used them for lab, you could pull these 2 handles and it actually will push the monkey all the way to the front door if they need to do any kind of injection or anything. They're extremely hard to clean because they have this metal grate by the wall and you can't get in there. So we have to take them out and spray them with a hose. So they're not ideal for litters of kittens or sick cats because they're really hard to clean. But I might see if maintenance can actually cut those bars out of the cages, and then I wouldn't have an issue with them. Because they can be cut out. I don't know how hard or easy that would be, but that's what the monkey cages are. They're hard to clean, so you don't really want to put sick animals in there.
They're different type of
It's a
cage.
different type of cage.
But these cages are, you haven't been out there and seen them.
But they're nice. They're nice.
These were all donated, or at least most of them.
Most of them probably, yeah.
Yeah, and they're very expensive cages that were donated.
So we don't want to replace any cages. We want to use what we have, but we just want to make it easier to clean them and use them.
Further questions? Does anybody have any additional information that will help with getting those of us who haven't been privy to some of this information to better understand it?
About the building or paying for it?
That would probably be helpful too.
We're planning on using, we have funds in our gift fund, that are for special projects, special care, like emergency care and things like that. I don't know exactly how much is in there, but we were planning on taking some of that out and putting that toward this, cause those are donations that can be used for special projects or whatnot, so we can't obviously use all of it in case, we have other things that need to be paid for, but part of that.
We've got several different groups, on the money, again, since we don't know what the total cost will be yet. We can't tell you that yet, but, Joanne is contributing or has offered to contribute a substantial amount, and Fracas, Friends of the Rusk County Animal Shelter, has committed some amounts, plus we have a we have a building fund that's part of the county thing, that's got about, you said you put in 700 today?
780.
Okay, so right now, because it was all spent when they built the shelter originally, and then they shut it down, so right now, it's probably got about $4,500 in it, that can be used for that, plus, donations from both Fracas and from Joanne, and then we can take money out of the gift fund, which again is another fund for, that, as opposed to the spay-neuter fund, we can't use spay-neuter funds for this.
Do you have a tentative timeline?
No, well, what we had talked about at our last meeting, again, we've got a ways to go on this, but we wanna keep the ball rolling on this. We were thinking if we can get definite or concrete plans done, that we could get the foundation in maybe this year and let it sit over winter to make sure it doesn't sink or anything, cause that's kind of a swampy area out there. And we wanna make sure that it's stable and everything, so if we get that in this fall or this year, let it sit over winter and then do the construction next year. Again, that's still up in the air, we haven't, made final decisions on that yet.
Thank you. Mrs. Spear?
I had just kind of heard about the desire to put this addition on, so then I did go to, an animal control meeting, and it was October already of last year when I made a pledge to this addition. So it's already 6 months, and the last building we built took years of advocating and going to meetings, and I'd really like to not see that happen. So, and you may not know that I have set up a Rusk County Community Foundation that can give out money to the shelter, and it's got a whole list of things it can't go for, but buildings and different things in the building is what it's for. And unfortunately, last year, the market lost money, so I probably lost like $4,000, but there is, I haven't gotten a real close report now, but there's at least $77,000 in that fund. And as it keeps growing, and if I add money to it, it has that ability. Last year, it gave a payout of like $1,900, and I think it went in the building fund, but I'm not absolutely sure. But that fund will stay there, and the more it grows, the more money it can give out if there is like handicap accessible door that was needed or something, or an appliance in the building, went out. So there is that as well. But I said to myself, when I went to this meeting, rather than put, a bigger amount into this fund, which can't give out money all the time necessarily, that I would really like to see this addition done. So my pledge was for $75,000 at probably maximum. And my preference would be that this money is in my money market account, and I would like it to be used last. Keep my money in there, keep earning money, because the more money it earns, the more I can use for philanthropic purposes. So, but that is what I told them in October, and I'd like to get it rolling, because I think we've got enough between the over $4,500 in the building fund, and a good portion, I don't know why they don't wanna talk about it, but a good portion in the gift fund, and Fracas has money. My estimate is around $130-some thousand. So, we are not really, I'm not here expecting the county to pay anything. I'm expecting us to, and that's only my opinion. I mean, people can have their own opinions. That's my opinion, is we're not looking for you to pay for this building, we're looking for you to approve it so we can get it going and get it done. So, that's my spiel.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee for the folks that are here?
Do these have to have state approved plans?
Yes.
So you'd have to have somebody draw this up, like an architect?
Yeah, as I understood it, Tony Lumber's willing to do tentative plans that may be useful to an architect or engineer who would finalize them and provide a tool to the people working on it to finalize what it is they want before they incur that cost. Is that correct?
Now, would that come to, go through both property committees then, right?
I'm thinking that this committee would need to make recommendations ultimately forward to the full county board and full city council. If that isn't correct, we'll try to find that out. Mrs. Carroll?
Mrs. Carroll. Hello, I have a different opinion than Joanne, and I'm sure Marty, you're gonna roll your eyes because here we go again. Almost 40 years ago, I came to you when you were on the city council, or maybe you were mayor, and I don't know what you were, but you were something at the city hall. Anyway, and asked to get the Quonset hut cages turned into an animal shelter built, and I don't know if you remember that. And and women keep time by when they're pregnant, and I was pregnant with our oldest, so that's 38, 39, something like that, I don't even know how old he is, years ago. And the city and county, I don't know if that was a group thing or just the city built it. And then about 15 years later, either the city county or just the city added on. And fast forward to the building that we have now. So to that point, it was no donations, it was all government funded. And then we started proposing the new building, and would that take about 10 years or something from first proposal to actually being done. And the total cost of that was a little over $600,000. And the donations part was a little over $200,000. And most of it was verbal. The Friends of the Animal Shelter we raised a lot of money too.
You did, yes.
And so we paid for like 1/3 of that whole thing. And so I would always kick myself if I didn't say, so why can't you guys kick in something? And I know what's going around in your heads because I worked for the county for 31 years, I've been retired for 11 years, but I still visit with department heads. And so I can pretty much document that in 40 years, the county board has never come to the department heads and said, the economy's good, you guys put in what you think you need. The first words out of everybody's mouth and in everybody's head is, the economy's bad, we don't have any money. So, let's just forget that whole argument and think seriously about whether the city and county can help out with this building. And I'm wondering, the library gal is here, is like, the whole thing that's kind of happening, because it's going really slow at renovating the library, is the Friends of the Library paying for that rather than the city county. And those are the only two buildings I know that you have together. You probably have dozens of them, I don't know. But I think that the precedent setting of making the Friends group pay for everything isn't exactly kosher. And maybe it wouldn't have to be the 2/3, 1/3, but I do think that I think you should think about kicking in something for this building, just on the principle of it, that it is a city county building. But, having said that, and now everybody's going, then I will say that yes, there is still, Friends of the Animal Shelter is still an organization. After our last big project was done, it kind of dwindled down in size, and we really only have 3 really active members, but we do have people in the wings that are ready to step up if we have a project. And right now we have about $10,000, but we're willing to flip some more pancakes and get some more money to get more if we have assurance that this is a project that is going to happen and there's a reasonable timeline for it. So that, I guess that's what I have to say, unless I think of something else. And actually Michael's our president, but she has got a big mouth like me. So She's more aware of things. So anyway, that's what I have to say. Oh, I know, I think of something else. The building had to go down and get state approval, and I don't know what it cost to get state approval. I am so unhappy with state approval. You know, I'm sure they got their money and they're all happy about that. But it came back with an inadequate ventilation system that cost you guys some money. It came back with inadequate materials in the cat playroom, because cats tend to scratch things, get things wet, and has to be cleaned a lot. And it came back without a handicap accessible entrance, and that was all state approved. So my confidence, I'll just say, okay, yeah, we gotta do it, we gotta jump through the hoops, we gotta pay them. Well, yeah. But they don't necessarily deliver a quality project in my experience, one experience.
Mrs. Spooner, you had.
Yeah, well, let's try to learn from that experience and not let that happen.
Right.
But I'm gonna add that the timeline is important, because the building that is existing costs a lot more, but it was because we spent at least, they started fundraising long before I got the picture. But for when we really started advocating and going to meetings and stuff, it was at least 3 years process of just doing that. So I don't wanna hem and haw over cost and price and whether you wanna pay for it or you don't wanna pay for it. I wanna get the project moving, and
I agree with that.
because the longer we wait, although, with the prices of lumber and some of the things, it's good that we haven't done it, in the last year or so, because the prices have gone down. But I don't wanna see waiting years to get it done because we're not sure, can we do it, let's get it approved and get going on, we'll come up with the money.
Does anybody feel that there's a formal action required by this committee at this time? I don't think anybody has any, issue with you proceeding to do what you've just explained to us. But formal approval here probably needs to come farther down the line when the cost estimates are nailed down a little bit better. Does anybody disagree with that conclusion?
I agree. I think the next thing, if you need anything from us to proceed with getting plans and stuff, you can work on that. But I think the first thing that we need is a solid cost estimate, and then we can find out where we need to go from there. So if there's anything you need from us to proceed at this point with getting plans on, we can do that. Otherwise, I don't think we need to do anything.
And if everybody concurs with that, thank you for taking the time to come and enlighten us. Much appreciated.
Well, we would have been here last month, but nobody told us about it.
I don't think it was on the agenda last month.
Yeah, it was.
It was.
Was it?
Well, not last month, but last week.
Okay. We always have an item for animal shelter on here, but I don't think there was anything specific under it. But if you alert me or alert the county clerk or administrative coordinator of specific items that you want on the agenda, we can certainly add them. With that, it's time to turn our attention to the library, where we do have one action item.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
As was reported at the last meeting, walkthroughs of the library were to have occurred earlier this week in preparation for receipt of proposals for doing HVAC work, which are due May 17th. The action item that's on the agenda today is to authorize mold remediation work to occur. We have a proposal from ServPro, which I believe is out of Eau Claire, to do that work for $3,928.67.
I'll make that motion to do that. We should have done last week.
You've heard Mr. Rabin's motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that. I have some questions on that move. Is that regarding those windows that were gonna change?
I think that's part of it, but I don't think it's all of it, Tony. And frankly, Gary would probably have to answer that for you. So, as I recall, it was, more than one place in the building.
Yeah,
Upstairs and downstairs.
Okay, so throughout, we can say.
Yeah, where there was flooding, I think was the big issue.
I think, my personal feeling on mold is something that as a public entity in particular, I think once it's identified, it should be taken care of as soon as possible, because the longer it waits, we leave ourselves open to claims, insurance claims. That's not a good place to go. We really need to get after it. So again, Mr. Rabin made a motion, Mr. Hauser seconded to approve this. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, no. Motion carried. Do you have anything else to add, Christina? How is the, work on the 2-page list you developed of little issues that might become big ones if they're not resolved?
I have not seen anyone there for a while, but there were things that I think were bigger, that were kind of connected to the smaller things, so.
Okay.
Once the bigger projects are done, I think those will be fairly easy.
I did ask the contractor that's working on the exterior about when he's going to start again. I know that would be something Randy would ask, and the answer was simply as soon as the weather's warm enough. It's warm enough today, but I think what he was looking for was to be able to look ahead and see that the forecasts were staying like this before that would start, so I would hope that would be very soon. Any questions about that or other items at the library? If not, thank you, and we'll move on to item C, which is maintenance. Connie has tried to make contact with Gary unsuccessfully, so I'm not sure what, if anything else, he might have had for you. One item that I added to the agenda that I think is relatively important is item C2, relative to ice and snow shields. I know that this has been an issue in the past with both city and county buildings, where ice and snow slides come off the side of a building and take off exterior equipment or damage it badly. And I only wanted to ask here that we do an inventory of the buildings we manage, looking for meters, piping that sticks out the exterior walls, things like that, that might need to be shielded in case of an ice fall. We've probably added them in several locations, but it would be nice to have a complete inventory where somebody says, yes, we looked at every building and here are the 2 locations where we think that should be done. Maybe somebody like Tony's able to fabricate something that can be attached to the exterior of the building. Usually an angle iron frame and steel roofing material will accomplish what needs to be, but I will just tell you that these things too, like mold, can get a little bit dangerous. Probably 10 years ago now, and Marty can correct me because I think he was part of the solution, the city of Ladysmith had an ice slide at the building space occupied by Westlake Enterprises. And to be graphically honest with you, there are people out there that are completely immobile. One guy hangs in a fish net all day long. And there are other people that sit in wheelchairs but are unable to move those wheelchairs on their own. And literally the ice took the, I believe it was the furnace vents right off the roof of the building. And you know, if we had had that exhaust build up and get down into the building, the issue might have been just trying to get all those people out in sufficient time and get all the doors open and air moving through. But some of those people are also people who are just very set in how their day goes, and to disturb them in any way, shape, or form during that time can be very problematic. So I think Marty, along with Hoover Construction, built a deflector up on the roof and replaced those facilities very quickly on an emergency basis. But the kind of thing that can happen. I'm just suggesting that we take preventative action as soon as possible to try to provide snow shields, guards, diverters, whatever it takes to prevent that kind of thing in the future. And that's on your agenda at item C2, if anyone would care to make a motion to just direct the maintenance department to do that.
Well, I'd make a motion to, do an inventory of all possible, locations or situations where there could be a problem and identify them. And then we can,
Go from there.
once that's happened, we can, proceed or whatever action we feel necessary.
Thank you.
I'll second that. Discussion.
Discussion, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Kenyon has seconded Mr. Hauser's motion, I believe.
The building that Alan Bradley is in now, where they're using their warehouse on Fritz, that's kind of what started this. Is I was over there on a Saturday and noticed that all the snow had slid, taken off all the vents for the boilers. Just took them right down. So I cleaned out the snow and stuff, and then Gary came in probably on Monday with a crew and rebuilt all of that. But I don't think they put any kind of guards up there. So it's already happened. It happened at Westlake, it's happened over there at Alan Bradley's in the Dahlstrom Alan Bradley building. So it's definitely an issue, and it's not something that just happens in a winter like we just had. The one out at Westlake was a regular winter, and with everybody going to metal roofs now, or a lot of metal roofs anyway, that snow has a greater tendency to slide. It slides in big chunks and slides in icy chunks, and it basically just took all of the vents off over the Fritz building. So it's definitely something not just looked at. They'll have to do something, and if you do it ahead of time, before you have to get around to putting the vents up, when you build basically a wedge or heel of some sort, it's nowhere near as expensive as it is if you have to rebuild all of the ductwork that goes into that. So.
In inclement weather, something.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for the motion and the second. Does anybody need any clarification on that? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, no? Motion carried. I have, here for your consideration, this is a proposal from Apex Engineering, which is heating, ventilating, and air conditioning engineering firm. They specialize in that sector. And you may want to consider this for a future meeting. But what it proposes is to design vehicle exhaust equipment and design a project that would install that at the Enterprise Center, where I don't believe there is some ventilating equipment there that I believe was initially installed for to remove wood dust, and some of that may be usable for putting in a vehicle exhaust system, but probably not all of it. I think we saw a detailed report at a previous meeting indicating that one of the rooms in that facility was so equipped, but that others were not. And then the other location covered by this particular proposal would be the Gates Avenue facility, where several county departments and the Ladysmith Police Department, last I knew, all had decrepit vehicles in storage. And according to law, that kind of ventilation system should be provided there. Again, we also heard Mr. Kenyon's father testify that if we're aware of lack of proper equipment and there's ever a problem, we would be more likely to be, sued and, sued for more money than if we're taking action to correct it. And if we think that that kind of storage is going to go on there for a long time, then consideration should be given to having the proper equipment there to ventilate. And you can see that it's, very expensive, and as you work your way down the page, you know, if you need this and you need that and you need the other thing after you've done step one, you can, pretty easily double that original number. Now, this would be just for those two buildings. I think I can also tell you, and you may be able to correct me here if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Bellstrom trucking space may not have exhaust ventilation. I don't know that it does,
It does.
but it can't be.
I know it's been in there, I've been there a couple of times, it's damp. So there's probably not good ventilation if there is some.
Yeah.
But on the back end, I think there might be some, but I don't know.
So maybe that can be checked out a little further too, but just like these other issues, we need to be code compliant or we expose ourselves to litigation and claims. So we can let that one go probably until the next meeting. I did get an email today from Gary Schultz, and I think it was relative to it says Gates Avenue building. I'm just going to read it. It says maintenance has moved the stuff they had in Gates this morning. Ambulance stuff is out. Forestry has 3 mowers and some weed trimmers, but would expect them to be out as soon as they need them. Highway has bucket truck here, expect that could go anytime. Medical examiner has minivan, expect that could go anytime. Animal shelter has cages in there yet. I have a spot for them if needed. So, apparently there's some effort is being made. I don't know if it's at the direction of the county property committee or who, but apparently some of the vehicles are being moved out of Gates Avenue, so maybe this problem isn't going to be long-term. Don't know. Maybe, we have no contact with Gary right now, but maybe somebody can track that down. Ashley, maybe you can
I
find
didn't know
that
they were
out.
moving any of that stuff out.
What's
I
that?
didn't know either until I got the same email.
Okay.
I said I didn't know they were moving that stuff out.
I didn't either until they received this.
I think most of it was like seasonal. So like,
What?
I think most of it was seasonal anyways, so
Oh.
I think it probably, this is about the time.
But
of
there is
year.
some long-term stuff storage in there, isn't there?
Yeah,
County has long-term storage there. As of now, it's, you know, the sheriff department and evidence and all that stuff.
but the stuff he was referring to is in the middle section, yeah,
Is this one done?
Just empty that out.
I think so.
Al, wasn't there HVAC work done, or scheduled to be done at Gates, some time ago?
There was, but, and I have reference to that in a letter from Mr. Rassak, but the minutes that I saw were not clear as to the nature of that work.
Okay.
So I was working on a response to that, and the response would be, I'd really like to see somebody look at minutes for 2 meetings before that date and 2 after, to see exactly what equipment was being referred to or what work. Hopefully, going 1 or 2 meetings forward or backwards would provide that answer. It's very seldom, I can't tell you right now, I don't have it with me, but I can tell you later.
Just email me and then I'll take a look.
Sure. Because most of the items that we discuss here, you know, end up coming up once or twice or 3 times before any final action is taken. So there's probably earlier references, but I don't believe that it was vehicle exhaust work. If it was, I don't know why it didn't proceed. You know, Andy Alvarado would have been managing the facility at the time. Why it would have gotten dropped, no idea. Somebody would have to ask Andy that. But I'm guessing that was not what was referred to.
my question would be that maybe the design came in more expensive than they anticipated, but I'm wondering if a design wasn't done already and it's sitting somewhere, waiting for someone to bid it out or whatever, because it seemed to me there was quite a bit of discussion on that one. And I would think that there was enough there that maybe it got to the point where design work was done. If they did, maybe we're reinventing the wheel.
Ashley, did you inherit Andy's files? Could you maybe take a look and see if you can find anything on that topic, or the best way might be to try to contact him and see if he can tell you what it would have been
Remember
labeled.
what he named it? Yeah.
Can we just wish her luck in the meantime?
Thank you, Marty.
I believe that, and I just wanna report this to you, I think that Gary had advised me that there was a mold issue at a third location. Does anybody else have any information on that? I'm quite sure of it, but it was one that he had not yet gotten a proposal on to remediate, but was working on it. I wanna say that it might have been the Dahlstrom trucking space.
Dahlstrom had.
Said there was two.
Yeah. I
One
don't
in
know,
the library.
the library had some downstairs, I don't know. The humidity rate isn't that high downstairs, I've had a humidity gauge down there for a long time, and it's not exorbitant. So I'm not sure what the
Source
mold
of problem
is,
would be.
right, what the source would be, as well as the type. You can get mold that's not black mold. I mean, it can be black even, but I assume what they're doing is testing it when they go in there, or they've tested already to make sure that it's the right type.
That is the approach that he was taking. They were testing and then looking at what would be needed to resolve it.
He said one was the library was 3,000 some, and the other one that they were looking at was 8,000 some.
You know, that's down at Fritz Avenue.
Yeah.
And that probably was the Dahlstrom space. I see, looking forward, that's there.
Yeah.
So I believe then that the third location would have been the Enterprise Center. But well, it's down under Gates too, under I-2.
Gates has got one, and Fritz has one.
So it seems to be an issue in more than one location. Well, we'll keep working our way down the agenda until we get to those.
It's library, Fritz, and Gates.
Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to mention on behalf of maintenance, or questions to put?
The only thing I would say is, if I recall right, prior to, Connie's election as county clerk, Andy Alvarado was taking minutes for all the joint management meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and, there's
Can't find them?
no minutes showing.
That's why I stepped in and said,
So, you know, we may have difficulty trying to locate just once some of this stuff is, discussed or.
Maybe they're in a computer in Sawyer County.
That? Well, I don't know, but I'm just saying, it was pretty lax as far as minutes were concerned on joint management.
this is 2020.
Okay.
Okay. This is what I got here.
Ashley can look while she's looking for that other stuff.
I think there are
We did.
some in his files, but they might just be draft.
I don't think there was any ever that I recall put out as, approved. You get drafts sometimes, but I think it was pretty lax.
Well, that's a problem.
I can look, cause we have a folder every meeting, every committee meeting.
Okay.
And so I'll try to look as well as, I
still have the leash missing, don't we?
So what?
A leash that was still missing?
I think several are.
Okay. Oh, there you have it.
Without Gary here, I don't think we'll have any update on the highway department's paving schedule for today.
He said he was gonna meet with him on the 9th. I talked to him in the hallway here, the highway commissioner.
Does anybody else have any other concerns or anything to bring up about the ADF plant item D? If not, we'll move to the Dowdy Road building item E. And that would be another Gary question. He was going to look into availability of a rental lift to be able to get up and install those rain handlers.
Those rain handlers, are they just a buffer, or are you talking about, gutters, or what?
Marty's actually the donor that, had some leftover from a project, so I'll let him describe it.
If you turn around and look at the Venetian blinds behind you, and then you open them up part way, that's what they look like. They lay flat, except the louvers kick down this way, the water comes off the roof, it sheds out, as well as breaks up, and it doesn't create, I mean, I've got it on my garage, and I've got it on part of the house, and it doesn't create an erosion down at the bottom.
Disperses
It's basically, right, it brings it up
the water flow?
and spits it out, and in the winter time, the ice doesn't gather on it. There's no icicles, there's none of that kind of stuff that hangs there. As the snow comes down, it also breaks through, it goes over the top. It works for me, all I can say, and I've got it on the B&B that we did, I've got it on the White House down across the park, I've got it on the garage, and like I said, it works, there's no erosion at the bottom, you don't hear all of that pitter patter rain, either, it works. One thing I forgot to do is I said I would measure up and see what I've got. I think that's about a 200-foot building, so we would need enough for 200 feet. I'll get that measured up, and I think I told Gary that he should stop and talk to me and look at it, so. Before we get ready to get a lift, I think Gary said that he could get a lift. But before we do that, we should measure up and make sure we don't have to order some brackets or stuff like that. It's not cheap stuff, but the brackets are definitely expensive work.
Nothing is cheap anymore.
No, that's true.
Anything else on the Dowdy Road building? If not, moving to the Enterprise Center, there was an item here to review a draft request for proposals for recently vacated space. The city administrator isn't here, he was working on that, so I guess we'll pass on that and go to item H relative to the Fritz Avenue plant. We have here another proposal from ServPro to do mold remediation, in this case relatively expensive, $8,030.06. Would anyone care to make a motion?
What are they going to do, do you know, as far as the mold remediation? I don't know what's over there. I know that where Ladysmith was, we had a mold issue that we basically took care of here at Ringston and I. And I can tell you that unless it is really extensive, this is really expensive.
What other areas are there that would be mold? I mean, there's the usual print shop, I don't know if there was ever a problem in there.
Well, that's where it's at, I think.
Huh?
No, the one that we were dealing with was in the bathrooms,
Yeah.
back at the print shop, because there was a toilet that had run, and the mold got up behind the walls and then on top of the walls. I mean, we basically ripped all the sheetrock off the walls and treated everything, and then we sheetrocked everything. So the only place I can think of at the Dahlstrom building would be on the north end of where they work on their vehicles. Otherwise, there's nothing that I'm aware of in the office or anything like that. So I would think that's pretty much all metal in there. before you approve it, I guess I would really like that we meet, get with Gary, take a look at that.
Okay. If nobody has an issue, I am a little bit concerned about needing to get on with
I
these
understand that,
things,
well, you
but-
go ahead, do it, I
No,
just,
no.
here to
I was gonna add to that we should probably let Gary explain it further. I think it was actually handed out at the last meeting, but I do not have copies along with me of that proposal. Moving then to the Gates Avenue plant. Gary was seeking authorization to do mold sampling there. Would anyone care to make a motion to authorize the sampling? I don't think there's any upfront cost to that.
Do you know the cost?
No,
No.
I don't believe they charge a cost at the sampling stage.
They hope to get paid afterwards when they can do remediation.
Right.
I'll move to approve authorization for mold sampling there.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Kenny made a motion, Mr. Raven seconded to authorize mold sampling. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, no. Motion carried. There's nothing listed specifically under the Jez Road building. Does anyone have anything on that? If not, we'll move back to an earlier topic, just for sake of discussion. And I think you all received this at the previous meeting, but this is a quote to do appraisals on other jointly owned property. And even though there's been no decision made to sell anything, appraisals have other values. It can be a very useful tool in upgrading insurance coverage on buildings. Another thing that Mr. Kenyon's father would tell you as a long-time property manager, there used to be a rule of thumb, probably still exists, that said you should expect to recover 10% of your investment in real estate annually. So if you spend $1 million on a property, you should expect to recover $100,000 a year. That factors in depreciation and other things. But the thought being that is kind of a standard recovery. And in our case, the other thing it would be useful for was to check our lease rates. You know, so if a building is worth this and so, you should be recovering 10% of that value annually. And we're way off of that, then it probably suggests that we need to be bumping the rates up. And it also is a good tool because it's hard to sometimes establish rates and compare one building to another. And sometimes properties that are older and in worse condition appraise out lower and should probably rent for them, as it makes sense. So, does anybody have anything to add in regard to considering proceeding with some of these appraisals?
The 140 acres, is that the?
That's the industrial site in Tony.
Okay.
Yeah, and that,
That's not part of,
it isn't, it was at one time, but it isn't, it was just, something that I thought would be useful to have for the county, but the county probably ought to consider that at the county property committee.
Is our rail yard still on
It's just 140 acres.
Yeah, but I mean, wasn't there a bid or offer on the rail yard earlier?
Well, there's a lease on it right now,
Yeah, it's down by XL, yeah.
IXL.
Yeah.
But I heard, I don't know, I don't have no information except that I was told that somebody was interested in purchasing 140 acres. Again, the most valuable part of it is that absolutely the rail yard with a spur, but there is other land there that's, valuable, and I don't know if you really wanna sell it, at least all of it. market rate. You know, because I think if there's more than $2 million stuck into that project.
You get nothing less than that out of it, probably.
And if you sell the land off, you're not gonna recoup your
Yeah.
$2 million. Only way you're gonna recoup that is through the lease of, long-term. You know, we currently have like a 3-year lease at $40,000 a year, which is just substantial, you know, amount of money for a piece of property that really is not costing us anything except a water bill. You know, a monthly water bill, and that's it.
The next item that I'm handing out is a continuation of a discussion started at the last meeting about, again, it's about sale versus lease of manufacturing type properties, why not? This particular handout covers City of Ladysmith projects that the city had taken on before most of these joint projects were begun. So I just wanted to briefly review what happened with each of those. Before I do that, I'll tell you that the top 4 with the highlighting is in yellow are all properties that were acquired for cash payment or by trade, and the bottom 3 were properties that have always been leased, and I want to explain why in each case. Quite some time ago, the city acquired the Bessie Lumber Company that used to sit right next to the paper mill in Ladysmith. We essentially built a new identical sawmill out in the Ladysmith industrial area, and then took the old sawmill in on trade, turned around, and by prior agreement sold it to an operation called Norenco, which was an acronym referencing Northern Energy Company, wholly owned by Xcel Energy, which then built a $12 million steam plant there to sell steam to the paper mill. And that operation remains there today. The creamery building that you're all familiar with in downtown Ladysmith, the city acquired that in the late 1970s, used community development block grant monies to totally rehabilitate it. The west end was then sold to, originally rented to, and ultimately sold to Indian Head Community Action Agency for its corporate offices. The east end was rented for over 20 years to Weathersfield Manufacturing for its factory outlet. During the time the city owned it, it made enough profit over and above expenditures to construct a building in the industrial park at 1407 Barnett Road, and ultimately sold the property, both properties. Also in the late 1980s, the city acquired a defunct operation called Prestige Casket Company in the Ladysmith industrial area, invested some money in adding on to it and refurbishing it, ultimately sold it to P.J. Murphy Forest Products, actually by prior agreement before the refurbishing was done, got all its money back out of it, and supported the creation of the half dozen jobs that exist there. Maybe even more importantly, provided an outlet for local wood producers to get rid of their sawdust and other residues, which were then remanufactured into other products. Then the city had a rail warehouse that it built at 1505 Warner Drive, immediately south of what's currently Centerline. And that was also bought and sold, and in all those cases, in every case, the city fully recovered its investments or made small profits. Now, the last 3 on the list, Rockwell Automation, initially leased one of 5 spaces that were created out of the defunct Mastercraft Casket Company factory. The casket company contacted the city of Ladysmith, told us it was closing its operation, moving it to Indiana, and was going to tear down the building. But if the city wanted it, they would gift it to the city. We decided that if we didn't make an effort to replace lost jobs in the community, nobody else would. And Mr. Reynolds and I, for sure, maybe Mr. Raven did, but we took a lot of grief over the first couple of years about that. We ended up investing initially probably around $1 million in grant monies that we received from the U.S. Department of Commerce to refurbish that plant and add on to it. Since that time, the 5 spaces that I mentioned, every time one of the initial tenants, and we leased out all 5 spaces almost instantly, but over the years, some of the tenants moved out, closed operations, but each time that happened, Rockwell Automation leased the vacated space. And ultimately, since that happened, we've added on to it 7 additional times, all for Rockwell. They're still there over 30 years later, always pay the rent on time. So it's worked out very well. There's over 300 people employed there. And the one space that Rockwell didn't get a chance to occupy was the space that Westlake occupied, which we've talked about earlier in the meeting. And they too continue to rent at that location over 30 years later. So again, the city's come out on that. Most recently, the city also rehabilitated the former Flambeau mine offices and garage spaces at the mine site, and the city leased one of those spaces to Excel for its local line truck for over 20 years now, although Excel is just completing construction of a new replacement building in Grant Town that's considerably larger. But the city already has a tenant very interested in that space when it becomes vacated. So just telling you that if you keep after it in the right way, even though there's little bumps in the road, you can get through it and come out. There's no reason that we can't do the same thing together. But in order to get there, you gotta have people taking care of stuff to do the minutes and make the minutes public available, and do the work that is approved.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chris just kind of glossed over a couple things. I think the key to remember just on every one of these is even though it's cost money, we haven't made much as far as anything out of return, we still employ hundreds and hundreds of people in these facilities, and they're still there. The jobs are still there. So the employment is probably as big, if not bigger, than whether we broke even or not.
So on that same theme, I'd like to go down through this list. I won't be too long, but this is kind of a list of projects that I think this committee has worked on. Some of these we're still involved with, a couple of them we're not, but I'll touch on that. The ADF plant in the Ladysmith Industrial Park, we leased to that firm that employs 22 people. I think the paperwork I've seen indicates we have always gotten our rent pretty much on time. That was grant money that built that, and everything that comes back stays in the local pocket for reuse to maybe cover operations that don't do as well. Centerline, owned by Ryder North America, was a combination project that had several partners. That made it a little bit more difficult than usual. If you think it's hard for 2 units of government to work together, that one also involved the town of Grant, and Northwest Regional Planning Commission had 2 loans into that project. But even though Norse Building Systems, the original occupant, folded at the time of the Great Recession of 2008. It was fairly quickly sold to Weathershield Manufacturing, which in turn sold it to Beechworth Windows, which in turn sold it to Centerline. It's on the tax roll. It's valued at $965,200, so, you know, we all benefit from those tax dollars that operate our local governments. At the present time, they employ about 35 people. The Doughty Road building is occupied by a local vendor who imports lawn and garden equipment from Pacific Rim countries and uses this as a distribution point in the United States. The Enterprise Center initially was filled with some solid payers. The anchor tenant at the time that occupied the largest space was a company called National Coatings. They did all the custom painting and wall finishing and those types of things for Norse Building Systems. So when Norse closed during the 2008 recession, National Coatings essentially went right down with them. There were a couple of other very good operations that were in there for a long time. One was called Ladysmith Machining. On the other hand, there were a couple of tenants like Allied Cabinet that weren't as good and left some unpaid bills and caused a lot of issues. But Rusk County Transit Commission occupies it and employs 23 people, so it is performing a service to the community. Fritz Avenue plant currently has very good payers. One of them is seated at the table here, but Marty subleases that space to the Marshfield Clinic Health System. Hooper Corporation is paid in advance. I think they initially paid like the first 5 years of occupancy all up front. And Rockwell, who's been a city tenant for over 30 years, now is a city and county tenant at this location. And one that I would strongly suggest that we do everything reasonably possible to keep happy in that location, because they have a good history here. Gates Avenue plant, you know, we've had some differences of opinion on what to do there, but Dunn Paper and A&M Fiberglass are paying leases and there's 5 people employed. Glen Flora building was originally conceived by this committee, and the county was able to sell that to 5R processors. 5R processors didn't work out, but it is on the tax roll. It's for sale for $499,000. Mr. Raven has called that to our attention. Henry Repeating Arms is in the former Conwood plant. That was 100% grant funded to the city and county. It was sold by the county to Henry Repeating Arms, which I'm told has 70 employees already there. So that's a real plus for the community. Plus, it's on the tax roll for the city and county at $1,750,000. That's a good taxpayer for us. The hospital site preparation, I think this one's gonna surprise some people, kind of forgotten, but back in 2007, the city pledged to spend up to $585,000 clearing space to the north of the old hospital that was just closed. You'll recall that the Mount Scenario College Fine Arts Center was located there. So $568,622.59 was spent in a number of projects that all resulted in creating an expansion site for the hospital, where the Mount Scenario Fine Arts Center was removed. There was a piece of West 10th Street rebuilt, some water and sewer lines relocated, and things of that sort. I just gave Ashley a copy of the City of Ladysmith resolution that authorized borrowing the money to do that. I believe that the city didn't proceed with that borrowing, and that we made a deal directly with Rusk County and said, county at the time was receiving received, by state law, received more mining money than the city did. I believe the county spent the money to do those, but the city over the following 10 years repaid them all through the city tax increment district number 9. That's what my paperwork indicates. Indec, this wasn't a property that we ended up owning, but it's a property that the city and county worked together to acquire from Flambeau Mining. We developed it as a remote industrial site ideal for this. It's exactly what we had in mind. We frequently got contacts from forest industry businesses who tended to be dustier and noisier than most people would want close by. So this was down on a dead end road. We acquired it, developed the industrial site. We were able to sign on Indec at the time that they built that new facility. They had 22 jobs. I think they've mechanized a little bit more since then, and that number may be somewhat reduced, but they put over $2 million on the tax roll there. The Jez Road building is currently leased to UPI Pipeline. So they don't have anybody right on site there, but it supports their work crews that will probably be rebuilding a pipeline through this area in upcoming months. The Rusk County Airport reconfiguration gets forgotten by some. Tony will remember it because, of course, the airport terminal, such as it was, and the hangar used to be up on the north end of the property by the lake. But an all-new terminal and an all-new hangar was built on the south end. That was a mining impact grant that the city of Ladysmith prepared on behalf of itself and Rusk County. The city essentially handed over any interest it had in it, which it really didn't. It was just my time and effort to do the application. Spent over $500,000 received from that source to update that facility. At the time, it was very important because the people that owned Jeld-Wen then used that as a regular way to get here to go over and check those operations out. The rest of the community library was done together. We got an initial $1 million of mining revenues, and were able to secure another $350,000 worth of additional donations from people like Conwed, which donated the acoustical ceilings, and Weathershield, which donated all the doors and windows to put that facility in place. So I guess it gets a little bit maddening at times that we get a building that's costs $1.3 million to build, and then we maybe tend to whine that we have to spend any of our own money keeping it up. The Weyerhaeuser building was another project that ultimately was started at this committee and was built, sold to Active Dogs. They provide 24 employees there. It's on the tax roll in Weyerhaeuser and for Rusk County. I don't have that value in front of me because it isn't on the city tax roll. But here's some totals to think about what we've accomplished. I listed above 170 jobs, and those didn't include the public sector ones. Those were the private sector jobs that we've impacted in recent years. Plus put $5,920,400 value on the tax roll in just 3 buildings, Indec, Henry, and Centerline. And again, that doesn't include the values of Glenfield and Weyerhaeuser. So I think we've accomplished a hell of a lot considering. And when we start thinking about the things that bother us, take the totality of all of these taken together, and I think it paints a fairly successful picture of the end. Any questions? If there are no, what?
Set a date for the next meeting so everybody knows.
Yeah, do you have one in mind that you'd like, or?
No.
Okay.
I don't have any, but I don't know if you want to look at the calendar right away.
to do it late this month at the latest. I did leave a note with Al Rassack about, getting on the county board agenda, which I think is May 24th.
23rd. So, tell me when.
Sometime after that. I would actually, what I would intend to do and hope to do at the county board meeting that evening, if it is an evening meeting, is review some of these same materials that I just did. Because as I've said before, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We have new people that aren't aware of some of these things, but they need to be.
So are you looking at like the 25th, 26th?
Yeah, so it has to be, we used to meet on Fridays until the Friday afternoon. Lawyer came up here, so then we moved back to Thursdays.
So do you wanna go with the Thursday then, the 25th?
Yeah, tentatively, it's, reserved for meetings.
What time are you thinking?
Mike told me that 1 o'clock works better for him than 3 does.
And I'll put it in there right now.
Didn't hear much about it. Does anybody have any further business questions, comments, anything like that?
What you just said, the 25th at 1, is that?
Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you all for your time and input.